Multinutrients, one of my favorite formulas. It was designed for those with gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, and it was formulated using a synergistic combinations of vitamins, minerals, and active cofactors that enhance the uptake. Each of the 40 nutrients packed into this powerful and compact super multi is provided in the optimal amounts using only those mixed nutrient forms found in nature and proven through research to be safe and effective. Research has shown that those with gluten sensitivity are much more likely to have deficiencies in vitamins and minerals. Research has also linked those deficiencies to the onset of major diseases: B vitamin deficiency and heart disease, zinc deficiency and poor immune function, mineral deficiencies and bone loss, and vitamin D deficiencies and autoimmune disease. That's why I developed multinutrients. Now, the key benefits of multinutrients include: number one, it supports nutritional balance. It aids in the overcoming of deficits caused by years of gluten-induced damage. It supplements key and essential nutrients not being obtained through the diet. It includes bioactive nutrients for enhanced absorption, uptake, and utilization by the body. This gluten-free formula provides for safe nutritional supplementation. For regular use, take 2 to 4 capsules a day. If you take 4 capsules a day, make sure you do that in divided doses. It's best taken with food. For high stress use, take 6 capsules a day in 3 divided doses with food. So that's 2 capsules with breakfast, with lunch, and with dinner. Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Osborne, founder of Gluten Free Society, and I'm here in the manufacturing plant where all my products are made. I wanted to give you a behind-the-scenes tour to show you how we make my products so you can be as confident as I am that they are safe, powerful, and effective. In step 1, when a raw material ingredient arrives at the facility, we first need to make sure it really is what our supplier says it is. For instance, if we ordered magnesium, we test to verify that that's what they shipped. Then we further test to ensure it has 0 issues with harmful bacteria or heavy metal levels. Why do we do this? I want proof from the start that you're getting clean, safe ingredients. This step exceeds industry standards, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Then comes step 2. Once all the raw materials pass this first step of quality control, they're weighed individually so the right ingredients and the right amounts end up in your supplements. They're blended in specialized machinery to make sure you get the same product each and every time. During step 3, the product is packaged and goes to the lab for its final round of testing. In this stage, we confirm that what's on the label is in the product and retest to ensure nothing unexpected has snuck in. Testing before, during, and after might seem redundant to you, but we want to be absolutely certain you can trust these products. By the way, if you get your supplements somewhere else, there's a chance they may not have been tested at all. I use these products in my clinic, I use them myself, I use them with my friends and family and loved ones, and most importantly, I share them with you, knowing you'll see powerful results in your own health. And as always, we want to make sure you have access to high quality, gluten-free products so that when you're looking for supplements to take, you don't have to worry about cross-contamination issues that could make you sick. Multinutrients, one of my favorite formulas. It was designed for those with gluten sensitivity and celiac disease, and it was formulated using a synergistic combinations of vitamins, minerals, and active cofactors that enhance the uptake. Each of the 40 nutrients packed into this powerful and compact super multi is provided in the optimal amounts using only those mixed nutrient forms found in nature and proven through research to be safe and effective. Research has shown that those with gluten sensitivity are much more likely to have deficiencies in vitamins and minerals. Research has also linked those deficiencies to the onset of major diseases: B vitamin deficiency and heart disease, zinc deficiency and poor immune function, mineral deficiencies and bone loss, and vitamin D deficiencies and autoimmune disease. That's why I developed multinutrients. Now, the key benefits of multinutrients include: Number one, it supports nutritional balance. It aids in the overcoming of deficits caused by years of gluten-induced damage. It supplements Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. Today I'll take your questions as you ask them. We just did a major crash course on autoimmune disease. If you missed the show on Tuesday, make sure you check out the replay of that show. It's packed with information. It's one of our longer shows, about 2.5 hours. Bookmark it, watch it as you need. If you're struggling with autoimmune disease, I can't recommend it enough. It answers the vast majority of questions that need to be answered about how you can overcome autoimmune disease. Again, one of the myths is that autoimmune diseases are inherited traits, genetic, and in reality, as we'll talk about today, that's not it at all. So we're gonna get your questions answered today. So start typing those into the feed. I'm gonna answer some of the viewer questions that came in after Tuesday's show. So, are autoimmune diseases hereditary? So this was a big one, and a lot of people have been told by their doctors it's genetic. We don't know the simple kind of way we see this happening, and this is just my experience clinically in having patients come to see me, is that their doctors told them you have Sjogren's, you have Hashimoto's, you have myofasciitis, you have fibromyalgia, fill in the gap, right? Fill in the blank on the autoimmune disease. And we don't know why. It's because it's genetic. In essence, they're saying it's hereditary. But what I want to show you, this is a diagram from a study that was published in the UK, and it was analyzing almost 20 years of data on the prevalence of autoimmune disease. And so here's what they found. In this 20-year period of time, they found that celiac disease had increased 105%, over 105% actually. So massive rise in celiac disease in a 20-year span. They found the same thing to be true of Sjogren's and of Graves', which is hyperthyroid, autoimmune disease of the thyroid, hyperthyroid, Addison's, which is autoimmune disease of the adrenal glands, and then ankylosing spondylitis, rheumatoid arthritis, which are rheumatological arthritides. They found that these increased more than 70% each. You've got myasthenia gravis increased, vitiligo increased, sclerosis, inflammatory bowel disease like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, vasculitis, and systemic lupus, or SLE. So all of these particular autoimmune diseases over a span of 20 years massively increased in the population in the UK. And so why am I bringing all this out? It's because you can't have this level of increase if the disease is genetic. What this tells us is that there's something going on in the environment that's triggering the rise. Now, if we look back at the 2000 to 2019, and again, this is for many of you, I know many of you are speculating around the COVID stuff, but these are rises before that happened. So we could add that to it and we'd probably see a greater degree. But again, environmental triggers, a lot of what's changed is the way our food's being processed. And we look at food as a major trigger. We look at stress, can be a major trigger. We look at environmental chemicals, pesticides, herbicides that are in our food. We look at the chemicals they put in our drinking water in the name of safety, chlorine, bromine, fluoride, and other things. And then we also look at malnutrition as a whole. So as the population has eaten more and more poorly, plenty of calories, but just horrible levels of nutrients. And so these are factors involved in the triggering, because these studies accounted for genetics, they accounted for the sex of the person, they accounted for smoking and alcohol use. So those were variables that were controlled for in this particular study. So the only thing you're really left with is that it cannot be genetic. It has to be environmental. And that's an important piece to understand why. Many of you have been told it's genetic and you're like, I don't know what to do. My doctor says it's genetic, and so then what are you faced with? Well, depending on the disease, if you look at some of these, celiac disease, obviously you're faced with a gluten-free diet, which should be the case. Diet change is great. But Sjogren's, Graves', Addison's, rheumatoid, lupus, etc., what are you faced with? You're faced with these very, very powerful medications that increase your risk for the development of cancer for the rest of your life, meaning you're faced with immunosuppression, powerful drugs that cause cancer in the long run as your only viable option for change. They basically, the diagnosis, when they tell you it's genetic, they take away your hope. They say, oh, you have this disease. We don't know why it's genetic. There's nothing you can do about it except take this medicine for the rest of your life. Well, that works really, really great for pharmaceutical wealth and for doctors who aren't willing to dig and who aren't willing to understand deeper biochemistry and actually help patients. But it works horribly for the patient themselves. So if you've been told this, understand it isn't genetic. There are genetic predispositions, meaning that you can look at certain genes. The genes that are most linked to autoimmune disease are HLA-DQ and HLA-DR genotypes. So there are certain patterns genetically that can increase a likelihood of developing an autoimmune disease. But if you look at autoimmune disease as a whole, and you say, okay, what are we talking about? Genetically, genes account only for about 30%. The rest, it's food, it's toxins from the environment, it's microbes. We know for a fact that certain bacteria like H. pylori and streptococcus. We know that Klebsiella, Pseudomonas, Citrobacter, Lyme, Borrelia can all drive autoimmune disease. And then we also, I make enough room here, but it's also stress, and there's multiple layers of stress. You can have emotional stress, physical stress, chemical stress. These are the environmental triggers. And so when you have enough of these triggers going on in your background and you have genetic predisposition, you're going to be much more likely to develop autoimmune disease. And if you're a woman, you're very much more likely to develop an autoimmune disease. It's just the nature of that beast. 4 out of 5 autoimmune diagnoses are women. So 80% of autoimmune disease occurs to women. It's actually in the top 5 causes of death for women under the age of 65. So it's very, very serious. But what I want you to take away from that question is autoimmune disease isn't genetic. It's environmental risk factors that you need to have investigated, measured, and then deal with them. I have seen over 10,000 patients in the last 25 years, and I've seen many, many, many of them go into remission, get off their medications, have a life worth living, and be healthy. And I want you to know that you can too. You just have to get the ideology out of your head that this is a genetic thing that you can't change. Okay. This is another question that comes up a lot, and I think there's a great misunderstanding, but what is autoimmune disease? The simplest answer that if you get on most websites is that autoimmune disease is when your immune system attacks your tissue. So your immune system attacks you. And I would argue that this is a complete falsehood. Your immune system's not stupid. Your immune system isn't making a mistake. In essence, what happens with autoimmune disease, if you look at this image, blow it up here for you. Going back to, this is the outdated view. Genetics, bad luck, lands you with an autoimmune diagnosis, which then lands you on drugs that suppress your immune system and long-term give you cancer. This is a horrible way to do it. Here's the reality. Genetics play a small role, diet, microbes, toxins driving this process. Now, understand that your immune system isn't attacking your cells. What your immune system is doing is it's attacking things that are inputs. So it's attacking toxins that you're being exposed to, microbes, diet, foods. As these things come in, your immune system is saying, hey, what in the hell are you doing? These aren't things that belong in the body. So it's mounting immune responses. And there are multiple types of immune responses that can be mounted. But your immune system is not making a mistake. It's not attacking you, it's attacking these things. And so part of what happens is your immune system is going after these triggers. It causes inflammation. A lot of that inflammation is formed by antibodies, but some of that inflammation is also formed by what's called collateral damage. As your body is going after the toxin, the bacteria, the food antigen, it's creating basically bombs, weapons from the immune system to try to neutralize these toxins you're being exposed to. And in the process, that inflammatory process has leach over, it bleeds over, and it can affect your joints, it can affect your liver. It depends on where in the body the inflammatory reaction is occurring. But I want you to understand, autoimmune disease is not your body's immune system being an ignorant fool and attacking you. It's your immune system is rightfully reacting against the things you're being exposed to. And if you can determine diet, microbe, toxins, what those things are, and there's hope for that because there's tests that can be used to measure these things, then you can get answers that lead to meaningful changes, right? It's easy once we know what's here and here and here, it's easy to make those adjustments and to see that inflammation start to calm down and go away, in which case your immune system no longer needs to aggressively create an inflammatory response because it's no longer being exposed to things that it views to be a threat. So anytime a doctor says that your immune system is attacking you, probably get a second opinion. I'd run the other way myself because that's such an antiquated thought. We know so much more about autoimmunity today than we have historically. And just so you're aware, autoimmune training in medical school, so like you're going to your medical doctor expert and you're thinking that this guy trained aggressively in autoimmune disease, understand there's very poor training. Autoimmune disease is a cluster of estimated about 140 different diseases, syndromes, and symptoms. And the average training in school is pretty poor because you're looking at 140 different conditions, and some of them affect the liver, some of the skin, some of the bones, some of the joints, some of the nervous system, etc. And so what happens is you get this fragmented education. So if you're not a doctor that's specifically training, in rheumatology, for example, you're not really learning much about autoimmune disease. And if you're training in rheumatology, you're really only learning about diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, ankylosing spondylitis, psoriatic arthritis, the rheumatological diseases. But if you're a neurologist, you're not learning about those things. You're learning about neuropathy, and you're not even learning about neuropathy in the context of autoimmune reactions. You're just learning about how to diagnose it and how to medicate it with gabapentin mostly. So the medical fragmentation, where we seek to give a diagnosis, we seek to give a medication to basically cover up the symptoms without ascertaining or understanding the root cause or the underlying triggers, which are these things here, is why our system is failing so many patients. So be aware of that. Your immune system's not broken. Your immune system is reacting appropriately to things you're being exposed to. And if you take the time to understand what those things are and you deal with them, hope is there and you can recover. What are the early warning signs of autoimmune disease? It's very interesting. There have been a number of studies on different kinds of autoimmune disease. With celiac disease, for example, it takes an average of 30 years to get a diagnosis, meaning you have symptoms that plague you. They're not always super obvious. And so doctors don't quite know where to put your cluster of symptoms because they're not something they could declare as a disease. And so you go bounce around for 30 years not understanding what's going on. And then after 30 years of autoimmune damage, you finally get a diagnosis. But the average autoimmune disease as a whole, if we look at just all the different types of autoimmune diseases, some studies that show average time to diagnosis is 5 years and 5 doctors. So the average patient has to go through 5 separate doctors over a 5-year span of time once symptoms start to actually be able to figure out what the doctor wants to call it. Now, if you look at, I took the top 10 forms of autoimmune disease right here. So Hashimoto's, thyroiditis, Graves', which is hyperthyroidism, rheumatoid, lupus, Sjogren's, celiac, Crohn's, multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, and psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis. And what I want to show you is they all have their own cluster patterns of symptoms, as you can see in the outer rim here. But on the inside, you have overlap. And this overlap is where it takes 5 years and 5 doctors typically to get the diagnosis, because what are you looking at? What are these symptoms? Generalized fatigue, brain fog, joint pain, muscle pain, digestive issues, rashes, inflammation, numbness or tingling, mood changes, sleep disruption. Well, if you have fatigue, you go to your GP. What do they generally do? They call it depression, send you to a shrink. You know, maybe they call it anxiety, put you on an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety medication. I mean, that's year 1, right? And then medicines don't do so well. You're not really solving the problem. You start developing brain fog. You go back to your GP. They're like, oh, I don't know what this is. Here, you're also having joint muscle pain. Why don't you go see a rheumatologist? Rheumatologist maybe bounces around, but your antibodies aren't elevated enough, so they don't really confirm a diagnosis because it's still too early. Your immune system antibodies haven't quite built up enough for them to be able to measure them. And then, you know, now you start having GI problems, and so you go to a gastroenterologist, and they do a scope, which is, in my opinion, for most cases, a total waste of time, because a scope, excuse me, a scope is a picture. Just them running a camera tube through your GI tract and taking a picture of what it looks like, which, you know, you go back to what you were taught in grade school, never judge a book by its cover, right? Why would we use predominantly the visual appearance of something to make all of our decisions? Most GI doctors don't look at chemical analytics. And so you don't get a diagnosis because the damage isn't so pervasive that you have villus atrophy or that you have, you know, white blood cell infiltration into the issue. You're just not digesting your food very well, and they're not willing to dig deeper than a scope. And then you start getting these skin rashes, and you go to your dermatologist, right? Now what are we on, doctor number 4? And what do they treat you with? They basically say, oh, that looks okay. Let's try a steroid cream. And they put you on a steroid cream for the next year, and it helps. It makes the rash go away. But every time you get off the steroid cream, your rash comes back, and then long-term steroid cream use causes thinning of the skin and creates other problems. And so, you know, in your heart of hearts, that's not the solution. And now you start getting numbness and tingling. So you go to the neurologist, and they diagnose you with something like peripheral neuropathy, and then they give you gabapentin, and that doesn't really solve the problem. So you get my point here. And then, you know, as you move through this sleep disruption, you go see a sleep specialist. They give you a CPAP machine. Nobody's figured out what's wrong with you. Nobody's really giving you a confirmed diagnosis. But after 5 years of these types of symptoms, and remember, these are the symptoms that all overlap with all of these top 10 autoimmune diagnoses, you finally maybe make your way into a doctor who, at a point where your body's breaking down so severely, they find some labs and they stamp you with an autoimmune diagnosis. And the next thing they do is pull out the prescription pad and write a script for you and say, we don't know what causes it. This is genetic. Here's this drug. Take it for the rest of your life. Come back and see me in 6 months and we'll monitor you. And so you still don't really get an answer. So that's no way to go about it. But autoimmune disease has multiple symptom overlap. These symptoms are not always super easy for most doctors to kind of put together because they're not really looking, because, you know, specialized medicine has fragmented doctors. They're wearing tunnel vision goggles. And so GI doctors only see gut problems, but ignore all the others, right? Rheumatologists only see joint muscle issues and ignore predominantly the others, right? And on and on and on. And so you're stuck with this problem. But those are the early warning signs. So the question was, what are the early warning signs? It's fatigue, it's brain fog, it's generalized joint pain without trauma, it's digestive problems, but not so severe that you're pooping blood. It's you're not sleeping as well, and you're irritable and you're moody, and sometimes you feel numbness and tingling in your hands, and Sometimes you might get a rash, but it's not always there and it comes and goes. It's the little things that are slowly trying to warn your body that this process is underway, and it takes time for the damage to be progressive enough for a doctor who actually starts to ask the right questions and runs the right test to finally give you a diagnosis, which is that, again, 5 years, 5 doctors. And that's if, in my opinion, that's if you're lucky. The average person I see in my clinic, it's more like 20 years, 20 doctors. But my clinic may be a little bit biased. Okay. You're moving along, you're doing well, maybe you've changed your diet, and then you get a flare, you get an autoimmune flare. So what causes autoimmune flares? The biggest thing that drives autoimmune flares are triggers. We go back and look at this funnel here. So what are the triggers? The big ones that you can control are these 3. But if you don't know what to control, and there are things coming through, you can get a triggering effect or a flare. This is one of the top ones that I see. One of the biggest reasons we'll see flares is yeast overgrowth. And so one of the common scenarios that we see is I get people all the time from all over the world that come to my clinic, and they come in and they say, I was following no grain, no pain, the diet in your book, and I was doing really, really fantastic. And then all of a sudden I had a major flare. And then we start asking questions. One of the drivers is that they got an infection, like a urinary tract infection or something similar. They took an antibiotic, and that antibiotic triggered a yeast overgrowth. And that yeast overgrowth, which is a microbial trigger for autoimmunity, is driving the flare. So that's an example of what I see very frequently in my practice. Now, there are other reasons why, diet. This could be you're reacting to other foods because of, for whatever variety of reasons. This could be that you're being exposed to something new from the environment. Maybe you've got something in your drinking water and you didn't know it was there, but maybe there's a higher level of chlorine. Chlorine acts as an antibiotic in the gut, and you're not filtering your water. So now, as you have that chlorine interaction, you can still get, you can get a yeast overgrowth. But the yeast overgrowth is, in my experience, the most common reason we'll see autoimmune flares. And those can happen for a variety of different reasons. If you want to learn more about yeast and how to conquer yeast and yeast overgrowth, I have a crash course on that, and I can put a link in the comments below. Okay, can stress and anxiety trigger an autoimmune response? Simply put, absolutely yes. One of the biggest things that we'll see is somebody will lose a loved one, or somebody will go through a period. Usually we'll see like a 50-plus woman or man who's having to do caretaking for a failing a health of a parent. And so they're now become a caretaker, which is one of the most stressful things a person can go through. And then they start developing symptoms. So stress and anxiety can definitely drive an autoimmune response. One of the mechanisms here when you're under stress is there's an increased output of cortisol. And with cortisol being chronically high, your blood sugar goes up, your blood pressure goes up, your muscle mass goes down. Cortisol is a catabolic steroid. It chews through muscle. Basically, it sacrifices muscle to gain the energy components to maintain your ability to sustain the chronic stress. And when you have blood sugar problems and blood pressure problems, what that does is it reduces blood flow, reduces nutrient flow, reduces oxygen flow, puts your body under tremendous oxidative stress. And now you start developing inflammation because of it. But stress is a big trigger. And this could be emotional. Stress could be physical. Maybe you got into a major accident. Maybe you had a major surgery. We see people with flares frequently after a surgery, a big surgery, because of the stress of the surgery. And stress can also be biochemical. So back to biochemical triggers. Food is a biochemical trigger. Microbes and environmental toxins are all major biochemical stressors. And so simple answer, stress can definitely trigger autoimmune disease. What's the best diet or lifestyle change to reduce inflammation? It's several questions like this come in. And one of them, there were several people that said, I don't have the money to see an expert or functional medicine doctor. What can I do right now? Like what are the things that I can do that won't cost any money to potentially improve or reduce the inflammation of autoimmunity. And the best thing that you can do simply is go on the no grain, no pain diet. If you're not familiar with my book, No Grain, No Pain, get familiar with it. If you struggle with autoimmune disease, I wrote it for that. But here it is what it looks like. You can buy it on Amazon. You can check it out at your local library if you don't have enough money to buy it on Amazon. So there's really no excuse. No Grain, No Pain is available in Audible, so you can listen to it. If you are blind and you can't read, you can check it out at the library. You can buy it at the local bookstore. You can pick it up on Amazon. Like, it's available, and it's available in 5 different languages. So if you're in Turkey, China, German, Polish, you can get it in those languages. We don't have every language, but it shouldn't be an excuse. But the No Grain, No Pain diet is the diet and the lifestyle change that I would recommend to start with. It doesn't cost you anything to make the changes that I discuss in the book, but it could potentially save your life. So start there. If you have no other resources, that's the simplest way to get started on this process of diet and lifestyle change. Okay, let's dive into the questions that have come in. Eugene says, hi, Doc, thanks for all your wisdom and caring. Can MS be reversed? Multiple sclerosis is what I assume you mean. And the answer is yes. I've had patients in wheelchairs get out of their wheelchairs and walk again. Can we put up a link for Eugene? It's her name is Susan, and she was one of our catalog patients we had. She had such a severe MS. She was having drop foot, and she was losing her capacity to walk. Anyway, she made a full turnaround, and so her story might inspire you, Eugene. And I think, that's a lot of times what we need the hope of other people's experiences to garner and gain the strength to move forward and do the right things. But watch that story, Eugene, and you'll see in real time, yes, MS can be reversed. See, Dr. Osborne, I need to understand the difference between your omega-3s, especially Omega Max liquid and capsules. So, the main difference between Omega Max liquid and capsules is just some people don't swallow pills very well. So we offer a liquid format for that, where they can get the high quality fish oil without all the toxins and toxic metals. And so then we only have one other product, which is Ultra Omega. And for Ultra Omega, the difference is it contains lipase. And the reason why is this product is actually designed for people with fat malabsorption and who are missing their gallbladder. If you're missing your gallbladder, you're going to struggle more to digest fat. And these are capsules. These are omega-3 is fat. So we're putting lipase in there as an aid to support the digestion of the omega-3 in people that are compromised in that way. So if doctors told you have fat malabsorption, fecal fat scores are high, maybe you have Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, or celiac disease, and you're fat malabsorbing, maybe you've had your gallbladder removed and you're fat malabsorbing, then Ultra Omega is the product that you want. It's going to have that digestive enzyme in it, built in, to help you process it, break it down, absorb it, and get it into your blood and into your cells. My very sick friend is trying your book. Is she celiac? Well, she has 3 siblings and a daughter who are diagnosed celiac. I know the odds on that. Yeah, so probably she is celiac, just undiagnosed. Look, the percentages of direct family members having a problem with gluten is extremely high in celiac families. So I see that a lot too. It makes me very upset where you have maybe a kid in the family and the child's been diagnosed with celiac disease, and yet mom and dad keep bringing bread into the house, and the siblings are all eating bread, and they all have their own health issues. Maybe none of them have celiac symptoms, but maybe, mom might have neuropathy and dad might have, chronic joint inflammation, and the other siblings are dealing with rashes, and nobody's made the correlation that the whole damn family needs to get gluten out. And so you've got one kid feeling like an oddball because that kid is eating gluten-free, while everyone else is pounding pasta and cereal. But in families, it's just my experience that if you've got a direct family member who has celiac disease, you should cut gluten out. It is not even my experience, not even need to test, but a lot of people need that test, that confirmation. If you want the right test, do HLA-DQ genetic typing for gluten sensitivity. We offer that at Gluten-Free Society for those of you who have doctors who are resistant to helping you. But get tested if you're on the fence. Currently taking low-dose naltrexone to manage flares, which is helping. Started taking after doing all the things, diet and lifestyle related. Helped, but wasn't enough. What else am I missing? Carrie, you're probably missing what I discussed earlier, which is, let's see here. Here we go. You're probably missing one of these 3 categorical triggers: toxins, microbes, diet. What's an example of a common toxin? Mercury, amalgams, silver amalgams. Some people have them. Some people have bacterial microbes under a root canal. So there's a lot of dental issues that can arise that can be drivers of autoimmune disease. Heavy metals, lead, cadmium, arsenic, aluminum can all potentially be drivers for autoimmune disease. Mold exposure. A lot of people are doing everything perfectly, beautifully right, but they're living in a home maybe where they're being exposed to mold and mycotoxins, and it's a major, major driver for autoimmune inflammation. So in these cases where you're doing everything you believe to be right, and there's nothing wrong with LDN, low-dose naltrexone can be helpful for many people, but it isn't going to solve your problem in the long run. It's a symptomatic quality of life medication. You need to dig for the triggers, and that means testing if you haven't already. So get with a good functional practitioner, functional doctor who can help you measure the biochemical triggers here, right? Very, very specifically. And if you don't have one in mind, reach out to my clinic at Origins Healthcare. Origins-wellness.com is our website, and you can go and learn more about what we do and how we help people navigate this. ER visit 2 nights ago, chest x-ray revealed I have pneumonia and pleurisy in the lower lobe. I turned down the antibiotics and steroid they wanted to give me. Suggestion. That's a tough one, Beth. I'm not saying you need the antibiotic, but it's hard to know. I mean, I don't know anything else about, did they run blood work? Did they identify through your blood counts that you potentially have an infection that may need an antibiotic? Sometimes antibiotics are okay in that regard if the infection's bad enough. But I would surmise that if your symptoms were bad enough that you needed to go to the ER, it's a tough call. I just don't have enough information to be more helpful than that. Because, I mean, like I said, the antibiotic might be necessary. Now, the steroid, probably not. The steroid is an immune suppressant. So if you have an infection that's causing your lung pneumonia pleurisy issue, the steroid itself is just going to suppress your immune system. It'll reduce the inflammation, and you probably feel better with it, but it won't help your immune system overcome the infection if indeed you have one. Would you explain dysglycemia? I've been told that I have it. My A1C is 5.4 and my fasting insulin is 5. I'm gluten-free. I don't know why they would tell you that you have dysglycemia. Dysglycemia is an erratic regulation of blood sugar. So you get big ups and downs. You get big swings up and then you get big swings down, and that can affect your mood and your energy levels. And a lot of times it can be triggered, Chris, by nutritional deficits. So for example, chromium deficiency, vanadium deficiency make it hard for your body to process glucose appropriately. Zinc deficiency can do it. Magnesium deficiency can do it as well. If you haven't watched my crash course on blood sugar, I strongly encourage that you watch it. It's a very in-depth, and I go through all the different parameters around regulating blood sugar that I don't have the time to get into all that in this Q&A today, but I think that would be a good resource for you. If the piriformis is tight, what's the best way to address that if you're already quite flexible? Well, if you're already quite, it's a paradox, right? Because if you're already quite flexible, then how is your piriformis tight? Because there are stretches, like you could do the figure 4 stretch where you cross one leg over the other and put your chest onto your knee. That's a really great way to stretch the piriformis. If the piriformis specifically is tight, but everywhere else is flexible. But you may have a reciprocal inhibition issue going on, like a muscular imbalance issue that's driving the piriformis into chronic spasm or into chronic tightness. And so that should be addressed and assessed. You might have a trigger point in the piriformis that needs to be manually worked out. There are a number of techniques, myofascial release, Graston technique, that can dig out trigger points in the belly of a muscle that can allow that muscle to kind of relax and let go so that it's no longer holding on and creating an issue. I think sardines put my sarcoidosis in remission. Is that a thing that can happen? I don't, without the better context, Charlie, here's what I would say. Did you just go on a sardine diet? Because if you went on a 100% sardine diet, what that was you also went gluten-free, lectin-free, oxalate-free. And so if you're a gluten-sensitive person and you went on a sardine diet, it's possible that it put your sarcoidosis in remission because gluten is a common trigger of sarcoidosis. But if you just only ate sardines, but you ate all the other things regularly that you might eat, you know, one of the nutritional resources in sardine is high omega-3, and sometimes people are really low omega-3, and so their inflammatory cascade is overreacting, and so that also could be a potential possibility. Just getting those omega-3s in helps your body to regulate the inflammation more effectively. But those are the best two answers I can give you with the limited context. Any recommendations for TMJ? Already seen a holistic dentist, but every night guard I'm given, I grind my way through. Yeah, I mean, night guards are BS in my opinion. Like, no offense to any of you out there that are dentists using night guards or dispensing night guards, but why are you having a problem in the joint? It's usually spasm. It's usually the masseter, the pterygoid muscles are too tight. They're clenching and causing that grinding at night. And the top reason that happens are calcium and magnesium deficiency. So the first thing I do with a TMJ, if it's a grinding issue, is just simply take CalMag. We have a product called Ultra CalMag. Take 6 of those a day. Start there. If you notice it letting up, solved. Magnesium and calcium deficiency can cause a pervasive chronic spasm's the wrong word, but tightness, which feels like you're clenching your jaws and that makes you grind your teeth at night. Formal name for that is bruxism. And if you correct those mineral deficiencies, a lot of times it goes away. Now, there are other potential triggers for TMJ as well. You could have any number of muscular imbalances. You could have other oral or dental problems where you've got unevenness when you chew. And so it's creating kind of a dislodge of the joint. The TMJ joint itself, there's a little disc in there, and sometimes that little disc can slip. So, I mean, you might consider visiting a chiropractor who specializes in TMJ adjustments or jaw adjustments. It can be very, very effective as well. But those are all avenues that I would consider pursuing. If you had to pick which is worse, highly processed and refined seed oils or highly processed and refined sugar, that reminds me, there was this, for those of you, any of you that ever watched South Park, maybe this is a little too vulgar, but it was a political episode where they're like, would you rather vote for a turd or something else? I'm not going to say it. It's like, which is worse, this very bad thing or this other very bad thing? And I don't like those types of questions because they're not reasonable questions. And that's not to say you're wrong for asking it. It's just like, they're both bad. And if you really want to get healthy, cut them both out. And so instead of saying, I'm going to do this one and not that one, because what you're saying when you do something like that is you're allowing things that you know are poisonous to your body. And you're saying, I'm only going to cut one of the two out. You're allowing yourself to continue to be poisoned in a degradatory way. They're both bad. So there's no this or that. They're both bad, and you should make corrective action for both of them. What specific autoimmune diseases are spurred by stress, and what studies report this? Mostly there's prospective studies on the stress mechanism being a driving trigger for autoimmune disease. It's not like stress causes rheumatoid arthritis only, or stress causes Addison's only. It's never just stress. Let's be clear about that too. Like stress, emotional stress or life stress is a trigger, but autoimmune disease doesn't have one trigger. You know, when I show this diagram here, it's how many times when I've tested people over 25 years of clinical practice where I found only one trigger, where when we got all their test results back, there was just one thing that was the problem. And so we've changed the one thing and everything solved. How many times have I ever seen one thing be the trigger? Never, not once, not a single time. Usually there's a conglomeration of 20 or more triggers. This is what makes it tricky. And So if we're saying, stress being the sole driver of the sole cause, no, it's not. There are also other triggers, but sometimes stress is the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. And there are a number of again, prospective studies where they look at people's stress levels, and then they try to account the best that they can for variables, and they look at statistically how many of them develop autoimmune disease versus not. It's not the best science in the world, but sometimes not about a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial. Sometimes it's about the doctor using good logic and having a firm understanding of underlying physiology and pathophysiology to be able to make clinical judgment calls. And I think that's a big part of what we're missing in today's society. A lot of doctors today are, I don't want to say this, maybe I'm going to say it, they're trained monkeys. And that's not an insult to any of you that are doctors, any of you that are practicing. But it's like, it's not your fault that the school you thought that was going to train and prepare you to help patients actually heal didn't teach you how to heal patients. The schooling you went through taught you, basic fundamental sciences like anatomy, physiology, pathology, biochemistry. But then they didn't teach you fundamentally how to apply diet and lifestyle and exercise and sunshine and good sleep and air quality and water quality to those conditions. They taught you biochemical pathways that you could block with drugs, right? Because the pharmaceutical companies have too great an influence in medicine, in care. I mean, honestly, they should be kicked the hell out of the classrooms. But the reality is that's not going to happen. I mean, pharmaceutical companies influence their guarantees that doctors are going to graduate. And I use the harsh term trained monkeys. And that's maybe too harsh. But when you train somebody to be a technician instead of a free-thinking, intelligent doctor who's capable of empathy and understanding and digging in and doing more research and knowing that it's not about double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trials that you're reading to make your decisions, that it's about making the damn decision based on spending enough time with the patient, asking the right questions, digging deep enough into their history, understanding who they are, understanding their life and their life variables, because all of that matters in the context of their disease. And to throw a drug or two drugs at their biochemistry and think you're doing any good for anyone in the world is, in my opinion, a pipe dream, and that should go away. But it won't. That's the reality. Drug companies are just too damn powerful, and we're not going to see that change. The only way we're going to see something like this change, folks, is if you start making a different decision. And many of you are. That's why you're here. You're trying to learn and figure out. You're trying to become empowered so that you can have a more intelligent conversation with your doctor, so that you can have a better understanding of what it is what their recommendations are, and how that aligns with your values, and how that aligns with what you feel like you need to do to improve your overall health. Because at the end of the day, the doctors are probably not going to change. The ones that are going through are going to keep going through. They're going to keep writing scripts. They're going to keep looking at you and tell you one problem, one copay. Like, it's a whole system designed to fail and capture as much profit as possible while not really helping or resolving anybody's illness. And at some point, maybe it'll reach a level of frustration for the average person that there'll be a revolution in the way things are done. But I don't think so. I think that intelligent people who don't want to take kind of the spoon-fed BS of here's the drug that solves your problem, I think those really intelligent people will seek out answers and will make meaningful changes and will get better, because those people are thinking differently and outside of the box. And if you want to be average, go to average things, do average things, do what everyone else is doing. What is everyone else doing? They're going to average medical doctors who are writing average prescription drugs, who aren't having any kind of helpful impact in the long-term consequences of their chronic inflammation. And they're dying early of miserable illnesses that steal their quality of life and steal their quantity of life, but they're accepting because their doctor knows best. Like, that's average. And if you want to be average, that's your path. You don't belong here in the Dr. Osborne zone. This path are people who aren't average. These are people who are discerning, who are intelligent, who are seeking real answers, and who are wanting to get educated so that they can make the best decisions for themselves. So anyway, I don't know how I got off on that, but anyway, hopefully that tangent was helpful. Let's see. Can you scroll down? I finished Candida protocol 10 weeks ago. How can I help my bladder, urethra, and genitals from oxalate irritation? I'm taking B6, not sure how much I can take. 50 milligrams of P5P is good. And probiotics, can D-mannose help? It can for some. If you're still struggling with kind of an oxalate issue, consider calcium and magnesium. Consider glucosamine chondroitin. Those can be oxalate binders as well if you haven't already. And then make sure that your yeast is totally gone. If you did a Candida cleanse, make sure it's gone. Candida can be really tough to kill, Lynn. And so some people do a cleanse, they weaken it, but it doesn't go completely away. This is part of why when I see people in my practice, we measure, we deal with it, then we remeasure to make sure that we dealt with it, that it's not still there, just weaker. Anyway, we can take this genetic test in the UK. Yes, reach out to my team, glutenology@gmail.com, and ask them. But in the UK, I think the biggest thing is just there's a shipping, and there may be oh gosh, not a tariff, but a duties tax or something along that line that they can help you understand that. What do you recommend people take when they find a tick on them in case the tick is carrying something? I don't recommend just preventatively taking, an antibacterial as a result of a tick bite. If you wanted to take something just specifically, I might do a vitamin D therapy round where you do 150,000 units of D for 3 days. You could also use Virid, which is an antiviral, antibacterial, antifungal formula, and 4 capsules a day for a week or two after a tick bite as just a preventative. Here's some tools and weapons for your immune system. But as a general rule, I wouldn't necessarily make that recommendation. I had an upper GI done, told my esophagus was highly inflamed, but negative for H. pylori and SIBO. I'm also grain-free, dairy-free, don't eat foods known to cause acid reflux, and did your food sensitivity test and don't eat anything I'm sensitive to. So what do you think is the cause of the inflamed esophagus? Probably a yeast overgrowth. It's very, very common, Monica, to see yeast drive esophageal inflammation. So you might consider getting a stool culture for yeast and having maybe blood antibody levels tested for yeast as well. I generally eat my meals of protein first, veggies with olive oil second, fruit last. Is there a pattern or a way you suggest to eat a meal that's optimal for digestion? No, because it's different for different people. I think the biggest thing, Jessica, is sit with the meal, digest the meal, be in the meal, like be in the moment of the meal. Don't have your head going in 17 other directions where your stress levels are diverting blood flow to your gut. Because eating is an act of parasympathetic nervous tone. And so we want to be in a parasympathetic state of mind when we sit down at the dinner table or the lunch table or any other table for that matter. So to improve your digestion, it's really more along that lines than it is like combining, because there's a whole thing on food combining that some people swear by. And I don't think it's wrong. I just don't think it's right for everyone, and I don't think it applies to everyone. I think certain people have such severe digestive issues that sometimes food combining can be helpful, where they eat their proteins and they don't mix their fruit with their proteins, etc. But for most people, it's not necessary to parse it out to that level. I have Sjogren's and I don't have tears. Would I ever get my tears back or put this autoimmune? You could. I mean, I've seen Sjogren's go away in people who do it right. Start with no grain, no pain. And from there, look for triggers. Get them tested. Because if you're missing triggers, at the end of the day, if you're missing triggers, you're going to keep struggling. Especially if those triggers are what are driving the antibody response against your lacrimal and glands around in your mouth to dry it out and to dry out your tears. Yeah, heat index is 114 and I'm going outside anyway because I'm sick and I need sunshine regardless of heat index. Would shade be adequate? Yeah, go under a shade tree. You're still going to soak up. you're going to soak up the red, the infrared, which is very strong and powerful and healing. You're going to soak up the other spectrum. You might not get as much direct UV, but you'll still get UV under a shade tree. So you don't have to go torture yourself in the hottest part of the day in the hottest area with no shade to get the benefit or reap the benefit of sunshine. Daughter is taking 100 milligrams of B2 to get rid of migraines and nausea while on her period until she gets nutrient tested. Says that makes her cramps bad and have diarrhea. Should she split up the dose? Yeah, I mean, I would consider splitting it. Sometimes you take too much in the same dose, it can create a problem. So consider, taking that. If she's taking 100 milligrams at a time, consider 50 and 50, or even consider a smaller pill cat size and do 25s. My wife just found out she has lupus, here to gain understanding and guidance. Welcome, Richard. Sorry that your wife's going through that, but welcome. We have tons of resources for you and your wife. Like I said earlier, I would start here, start here, read this, get it implemented right away. It's the quickest way to moving towards success that you could implement. Environment in the food. Okay. Had they increased in, let's see here. Could you please do an exercise class? We're working on it. My plan was to have it done this summer, but with the move, we moved into a new building and everything. It's a bandwidth issue, Melinda. So be patient with me. But it's in the books. It's on the way. I have gastritis. I take omega-3, B12, zinc, vitamin C. Eat gluten-free, no grains. What would you advise me, please? Get tested. You need to get tested. If you're doing solid things already and you're still struggling, you need testing to discern what it is that you're potentially missing. I mean, gastritis could be something as, innocuous as you having a reaction to broccoli or cauliflower or even beef or any other food for that matter. Like there's a number of potential triggers that it could be. You could have H. pylori, you could have yeast overgrowth, you could have other kinds of bacteria overgrowth. You could have a root canal issue that's, bleeding lipopolysaccharide endotoxins into your stomach, causing and driving inflammation. I mean, there's just a number of different things that it could be. My friend's taking peptides because she's tried unsuccessfully for years to lose weight, is finally getting results, but wants to know how to mitigate a mild histamine response. I mean, stop taking the peptide. Look, there's no free tickets. There's no free rides. I see this a lot, and this is no offense to you or your friend. It's just simply to say, if you're going to use peptides for weight loss, they're going to come at a cost. And, you could suppress that histaminic response, but what is your body telling you when it's having that level of a response because you're trying to trick it? It's telling you stop it. It's telling you don't keep doing that. So if your friend were to take something that would suppress that response, the reality is the side effects of that medicine are going to continue to chew away at her and eat away at her. And is that worth the cost of weight loss? I would argue she may have said she's tried everything for weight loss, but hasn't. Most people that say that haven't tried everything. They've given lip service to trying everything, but they haven't actually done the work. They've done the work for a short enough period of time or a limited period of time and been impatient because they wanted results tomorrow or next week, but they haven't truly done the work. I mean, look, I've been doing this work in one-on-one care for over a quarter of a century. And I can promise you weight loss is one of the easiest things in the world to achieve, but it doesn't come easy if you're not willing to put in the work. But if you're willing to put in the work and you have the right guidance, weight loss is an easy thing. Peptides, we're going to see this play out, folks. It's just my opinion. This whole Wegovy and Ozempic thing, this shit is going to play out to be a major catastrophe. There are already major lawsuits out. I can't remember. I think it's like 80 lawsuits, multi-billion-dollar lawsuits that are out there right now on these drugs because they cause real harm. And people are generally by nature lazy, honestly. And they want something to work for them quickly, and they don't have the patience, and they don't have the gumption to do it right. And so they're going to these easy things, right? But like I said, there's no free meal ticket. You'll pay a price one way or the other. And if that's you, and maybe you needed to hear this today, I hope it helps you gain better discernment over the risks. There's serious risks with Ozempic. And we actually have, and other peptides, not just that one. We have a class on that. Now, I'll put a link for those of you, if maybe you should go back and consider looking at that and watching it. Yeah, some of you missed the Tuesday show. The replay's up. You guys can go watch it. And some of you also asked if we had AI summaries of the show. And the answer is yes, we do. It's just that when the show is going live Tuesday night, AI hasn't had a chance to create those notes. So you got to come back at a later date when the AI actually has also watched the show and been able to give you the synopsis with the notes. So for those of you who were struggling because you were missing that, it's because we do our shows, we launched them for the first time. YouTube hasn't even seen the whole show yet, so they can't have an AI overview of it yet. Eric Alaverdian, good to hear from you. Thanks for the compliment on the shirt. My wife bought me this shirt. She dresses me well, typically. Need advice for Crohn's with stricture. Required to have a CT scan or MRI with contrast, and then of course colonoscopy. Advice to have surgery and biologics. Maria, you got to change your diet. No grain, no pain is where I would start. I mean, those are heavy things. That kind of surgery, even those images with all the dyes that they're going to inject into you. You got to work with somebody who knows what they're doing. I mean, otherwise you're doomed to a life of biologics and having part of your colon ripped out. I have a lot of energy and well-regulated digestion, but I do not feel whether I am full or hungry. How do I know what state my health is? Is my body absorbing enough vitamins and minerals? It's a good question. I mean, if you're not getting hunger, full cues, consider micronutrient testing. Do an INA. We offer that online at Gluten Free Society, intracellular nutrient analysis. We'll put a link up for you. But if you're feeling well overall, I would worry less about it. Like, don't micromanage the fact that you're not getting a full signal. I would say one best way to track it, low-tech way to track it, is to track your weight and your body composition. If that's staying stable and you're not underweight, you're not losing weight in any great degree or way, then you're probably eating enough. So don't overthink it either. I'm trying to cleanse from mold, but I've just been diagnosed with chronic Lyme. I'm having horrible thigh muscle cramps. Is this common? It can be, but I would argue that rethink your chronic Lyme diagnosis. A lot of doctors will give the diagnosis of Lyme over mold. There's crossover between the two. In a lot of the cases that I've seen, I've had so many patients come in that have been treated for chronic Lyme. They've been on antibiotics for a year or 2 years, and they didn't have Lyme. They actually just had a mold problem. And once we dealt with the mold and remediated and got them out of the moldy environment, the Lyme was easy enough. Because Lyme is generally, your immune system is strong enough to handle it. But if you're in mold and you're immunocompromised, then it's gangbusters. Your immune system can't handle much of anything. And then you end up with multi-diagnoses. And that's not to say you couldn't have Lyme either. I don't know what kind of testing confirmed that. A lot of the people, Mimi, that I see, they have, when they had their Lyme testing done, their results weren't definitely, they were told they had Lyme, but their results were like equivocally not certain. And so many times the doctors are just making a judgment call and thinking it's Lyme and calling it's Lyme and then treating it like it's Lyme. And then people aren't, if you get better, great, but if you're not getting better within a relatively short period of time, and I'm talking 6 months and less, not 2 years, then it's probably not Lyme. Is zearalenone mold toxicity, in your opinion, if not from home, more from grains or something else? So zearalenone is a mycotoxin produced by a mold class called Fusarium, or a mold species called Fusarium. And zearalenone mimics estrogen. And one of the things it can do is it can shift your immune system into mast cell activation. So it actually genetically upregulates the production of mast cells and the release of histamine. This is one of the reasons why so many people in mold are developing
dysautonomia, mast cell, Pott's disease. So it is mold toxicity. You can get zearalenone from foods. Grains are contaminated with zearalenone. But as a general rule of thumb, if you're on the no grain, no pain diet, you're probably not getting it from your food. You're probably getting it from your environment. And so then you got to go seek it out. You got to get a proper mold inspection. For those of you who are in mold or maybe suspicious of mold and you want to learn more, I have a site for that. It's called moldjacked.com, MOLD Jack, JACKED.com. I know more than I ever wanted to about mold. I not only have I been treating chronically ill people with it for 25 years, but I've actually lost a house to mold, lost my dog to mold. You know, mold almost killed my family. So I know more about it than I ever really wanted to. But I put that site together for people who want to learn more and really get educated. I was on Humira for 2 years before learning how bad it actually is. How much damage could have been done to my body, and what should I be concerned for in the future? It's a good question, Mary, but it's not a relevant question for you to lose sleep over or worry about. You did what you did. You can't change it. Moving forward, what should you do to overcome it? You should change your diet. You should change your lifestyle. You should consider getting your nutritional levels checked to make sure your body is armed with the right nutrients to heal and repair the damage from the past. And be confident and comfortable that that's enough. A lot of people, and I'm not saying you're one of them, but a lot of people ruminate over the choices they made historically, and then the stress from that rumination actually can create health problems as well. So move forward in confidence, trusting your body, knowing that your body knows how to heal. I mean, I've seen 90-year-olds heal. I know you can heal. I had a goiter that any doc could see from the door, but they opened it and they'd rush and fondle my neck and ask me if I had thyroid disease, to which I'd answer no, or not that I know of. More of a comment. Autoimmune trigger the pancreas. Is there any relationship in both? Pancreas not absorb fat, protein. So yeah, there's a relationship usually with autoimmunity and pancreatic dysfunction. It's very commonly gluten. Gluten can damage the pancreas, causing pancreatic insufficiency, leading to fat malabsorption and other nutrient malabsorption syndromes. And then once you develop nutritional deficiency, it's gangbusters. Any nutrient deficiency can create or drive a cluster of its own symptoms that oftentimes get confused as disease that doctors dismiss and try to medicate, and then they make the problem worse. But yeah, gluten is where I would send you if you've got a pancreatic insufficiency or pancreatic problem. What are your thoughts or opinion on having immunoglobulin A being low? Well, so IgA being low can be caused by many things. One of the more common reasons we'll see it low is gluten, gluten-induced damage. Gluten creates such an immune response that your immune system over time, basically it produces high amounts of IgA to try to protect you from the gluten, but the longer you eat it over the time, your body's ability to make IgA sufficiently starts to wane, and then you end up being low. One of the best ways to increase your IgA is glutamine, the amino acid. We have L-glutamine at Gluten Free Society. One of the other good ways is just to increase your protein. You know, eat a gram of protein per pound of lean body mass. Those are great ways to get your IgA production supported. Outside of that, clean up your diet. If you're having acid reflux, check for yeast overgrowth. It's one of the most commonly missed items as it relates to drivers of acid reflux, or what it feels like acid reflux. Because acid reflux can be a misnomer. Like, do you really have acid coming up, or do you have something irritating in your stomach that's driving inflammation up? And that's not really acid, right? And that's one of the things that GI doctors never measure, distinctly differentiate. You know, they just simply say, oh, you have these symptoms, therefore it must be acid, therefore here's an antacid, therefore take this for the rest of your life, therefore now you become malabsorbed in minerals and B12 And then you develop dementia early, or you develop neuropathy early, or you develop muscle spasms early because you're suppressing your acid when it's not actually acid reflux or acid coming up. It's just damage to your gut because of what you're doing, the foods you're eating, the things you're being exposed to. And maybe it's a different bacteria. Maybe your H. pylori is negative, but maybe it's another bacteria. Yeast, other bacteria can also drive it. What can be used for rheumatoid arthritis on the right hand ring finger? I'm not sure I understand your question. Are you trying to reduce the pain? Is it that particular finger is the most swollen and the most painful? Because it's not like, I mean, you could apply topical capsaicin, you could apply MSM, and there are other things that you could apply just as a general kind of support for inflammation. Castor oil even can be helpful in that regard sometimes. But ultimately, you got to figure out what your triggers are. And if you're on no grain, no pain, or if you started on no grain, no pain, that's a good first place to start. Beyond that, you need to get testing done. As a bioelectric being whose currency flows and regenerates with a plasma field, wouldn't resonance and frequency play an important role in innate immune function? Of course. I mean, light and sound therapies can be valuable. In my opinion, the most underutilized form of medicine in the world is sunshine. Sunshine is such a powerful tool. I have a whole class on sunshine as medicine that if those of you who haven't, you should go and watch it. But absolutely. Sound therapy as well. What do you think music is for most people? People can go and be in the most miserable state of mind and have pain and have problems, and then they hear their favorite song play, or they put their favorite song on, and it takes them somewhere completely different because that sound, it's basically a form of sound resonance therapy. Depending on how the music touches you, because I know the music I like to listen to and the music my wife likes to listen to are very different things. If she listens to my music, it makes her sick, and if I listen to hers, it makes me sick. But you get my meaning, those of you who are music connoisseurs. But absolutely, sound and light therapies. I mean, these are fantastic and phenomenal and underutilized. But I also think there's a lot of victims in this field too, because if you follow any kind of social media, they're trying to sell people tuning forks, and they're trying to sell people, different pulse machines. And it's like, no, stop it. Quit wasting your money on a machine. Passive therapies are not going to solve your problem. Can they be addendums to what you're doing? Yes. But if you think a tuning fork on your head is going to make your parasites go away because of a certain frequency, if you think that is going to heal you specifically with you making no other changes or doing no other things, you're buying a pipe dream, and I'd say save your money. But sound and light are very important in healing. It's just that they're not things that are passively going to make all of your problems go away. What's good for the numbness in my right hand most of the day and night is numbed, and how left hand, and now the left hand too. You've got a neuropathy. You've been anemic. If you're anemic, what kind of anemia? Okay, there's different kinds of anemia. You can have B vitamin deficiency anemia, and if it's B vitamin deficiency, it's most likely B12 or B1. And B12 deficiency can also cause neuropathy. So it's possible that B12 may be the answer for your numbness. It's an easy thing to test. Take it for a couple of months, 10,000 micrograms a day. We have a product called methylcobalamin. That's what I would suggest you try first. But ultimately, go get tested. Determine, if you haven't watched my peripheral neuropathy class, I just did almost a 2-hour class on neuropathy last week. I know a lot of you kind of moan about the length of some of my classes, but look, where else are you going to get 25 years of clinical knowledge in academia in one place that makes sense to the layperson who doesn't have a doctorate degree or a background in biochemistry? And so to me, long form is where you come to get mastery, not where you come to get a 30-second soundbite and then go spend some money on something that didn't work. Anyway, get tested. If you have a neuropathy and you're also anemic, there's nutrition at play there. Get an INA and figure out what you're low in and start supplementing appropriately. But also watch my neuropathy class. Are you planning to launch your own line of testing for microbial imbalances and chemical exposure? Danielle, that is on our table right now. The problem with it is we're trying to figure out how to logistically do it right so that we don't give people information they can't interpret or understand. Because at the end of the day, that's a big part of it. Some tests, there's a level of experience and interpretation that needs to be applied to them, and that's why we haven't released them yet. But yes, my goal is a full spectrum class on how to recover from autoimmunity, which I'll have hopefully done by the end of the year, and it's going to be probably 20 plus hours long. And all the nuance and all the experience that I've had that we're going to create for people to just help walk them through and hold their hand and navigate autoimmune conditions. And to also have a battery of supportive tests that they can use so that because the reality is you're not going to get it. I sometimes say, hey, talk to your doctor about this, that, and the other. And people quip, I'm not talking to my doctor. My doctor doesn't listen. And they're not wrong. Most doctors don't. They don't have the bandwidth to go into the depth that's necessary to accurately deal with or treat people with autoimmune disease, which is why I'm so passionate about being here on Thursdays and helping you guys. But that's coming. Be patient with me. We just have to figure out a way logistically to make it happen. I'm 44 with Hashimoto's, and I'm struggling with fertility. Am I doomed? You're not never doomed. But you got to figure out what your triggers are. Get tested. Look, April, reach out to my clinic. Those of you that are sitting there struggling, wondering if you're doomed, wondering why you can't get past point A, reach out. Don't do it alone. We have the resources here now that you can be helped by. Can Parkinson's be reversed? Depends on how late it is. Depends on whether or not, in my experience, is Parkinson's is either gluten reactivity or mold or both. Some people go gluten and grain-free and then don't see an improvement, and then they haven't found the mold yet. So I would argue, Diana, if you've got Parkinson's, look for the mold and make sure your diet's clean. Those would be the first two places I would start with anyone with Parkinson's. As far as experiences, I've seen cases do really, really well. I had a guy one time, he had Parkinson's so bad, he used a walker to walk. We treated him for 6 months. The last day he came into the clinic, this is the last day I saw him, it was amazing. He dropped to the floor and he did 50 push-ups, and he took his walker and he put it aside and he walked for me. And I almost cried. I was so blown away at his progress. But can it be reversed? Yes, I've seen it reverse. Is it reversible in everyone? I don't think so, depending on how aggressively progressed it is. But maybe. I don't want to take away anyone's hope, but you have to be willing to go the distance with looking for the triggers. And where I see people fail in their journeys with Parkinson's is the mold piece. Many people fail in their autoimmune journeys because they don't want to fathom what it means to be in mold and the consequences of change that need to be made for them to get out of it, because it's expensive if depending on the nature of your mold problem. I mean, if you've got a mold problem, your disease isn't going to go away. If you've got a mold problem and you're not willing to recognize it for what it is, and you're staying in the home and you're not remediating it properly, and you got people around you saying, oh, mold is everywhere and you're crazy, you'll continue to stay sick and you'll continue to progress. That's just my experience. Are tetanus things actually necessary for kids to get? And is there ever really a need to get a thing? I get your point. My opinion, no. There's the whole thing about rusty nails, but I mean, the reality is it's a treatable disease anyway. Tetanus is very treatable without the thing. So why would I want to risk the thing when I could treat it if I did get it? Can you detect microbial bacteria under a root canal or around an implant with a CT scan and x-rays? You can detect what looks like a bacterial infection under a root canal with a cone beam X-ray. So yes. And so you got to make sure that you go to a dentist who's doing that type of thing and understands it. But also understand that an image is an insight or a clue that it might be an infection. It's not a guarantee. But if you have a positive image, the likelihood is very, very high that there's an infection under that root canal and that you need to consider having the tooth removed. Do you consider polymyalgia rheumatica an autoimmune disease? Of course. I don't consider it. It is an autoimmune disease. Your husband's rheumatologist, I don't agree with. Why would he not consider polymyalgia rheumatica an autoimmune disease? The best way to treat it, no grain, no pain. Prednisone isn't going to do anything other than suppress his immune system, weaken his muscle and his bone, drive up his blood pressure, and you know, it's a false path. Janice, if he's following no grain, no pain, fantastic. Keep doing that. Go watch. We have a story of a patient with polymyalgia who couldn't even walk up her stairs. It's a great story. Actually, we played it in Tuesday's show. It was Shanna. Her name is Shanna. She's a beautiful woman and a wonderful story, wonderful outcome. But she's an example of how polymyalgia rheumatica can go away with diet and lifestyle change. Now, in her case, it took a little bit of tweaking. It wasn't just no grain, no pain. As a matter of fact, when I originally saw her, hadn't even written the book yet. And in her case, we had to do deeper testing. I mean, she had other food sensitivities. She had other microbial issues that had to be dealt with. And that may be for your husband where he needs to go in terms of, beyond the diet. But definitely it's an autoimmune disease, and it's definitely reversible in my experience. Any suggestions for scalp eczema? I do eat very well. It seems to be triggered by or exacerbated by foods. Well, you got to measure food and pay attention to your diet, but that's where you start. I mean, eczema is largely either a food issue or a yeast issue for most people, not for all, but for most. And so I would look there first. When just diagnosed with lupus and you don't want to take medication, what's the best to take naturally? For what? Because lupus has many manifestations of symptoms. So what are you trying to do? If you're trying to reduce pain, vitamin C would be where I would start. Vitamin C and quercetin at higher doses, 4 to 5 grams of each. But ultimately with lupus, you got to get measurements of what your triggers are and change your diet. Diet changes is an absolute must. I refer to medicine. Doctors are like mechanics. Identify the symptom, look into the book for the pill to prescribe. Okay, just more of a comment. Glorified mechanics, yeah. What can I do for RA? Kelly's asking. Kelly, right here, no grain, no pain. Start there. And get tested. Get with a functional medicine doctor to test you for one of the most common triggers we see in RA is yeast. I'd venture to say if I went back statistically and looked at all the cases of RA I've seen over the last 25 years, yeast is there 80% of the time. And so if you're going on a safe bet of my experience, it would be that I would look to deal with that. I feel dizzy and can't breathe right if the temperature is more than 80 degrees. What's going on? Well, you're heat intolerant. You need to get checked out. There could be a lot of different potential possibilities there. And so one of them would be like, well, give me more information, Jen, and maybe I can give you a little bit more, because that's too deep of a rabbit hole. We could go a lot of different directions there. I'm having trouble finding a doctor specialist for all my conditions. Call my office. If you're having trouble, call my office. We do remote consultation, and if you want to talk to me or my associate, we're happy to talk with you. And if you feel confident and comfortable with it, that it's a right fit, and you can go from there. But if you're struggling in that way, just reach out. Wanted to ask if you had a whole house water filter you'd recommend. Yes and no. It depends on where you live and what you have in your water. I recommend, like if you're on a well, I don't necessarily recommend as much of aggressive filtration as if you're not. So like RO water filters aren't necessary if you're on a well. For that, carbon 0.5 carbon micron block with GAC carbon, possibly KDF, should be ample and adequate. If you're not on a well and you're on city water, I recommend the full meal deal, carbon KDF, carbon micron block. I recommend RO at the tap for all your cooking and drinking. And I recommend you put electrolytes back in that water after you filtered it. But RO, as far as whole house, I mean, if you've got 30 grand to blow, get an RO whole house water filter. If you don't, just get the RO under your kitchen sink. It's a lot more cost affordable that way. What would you recommend? What would you recommend for an ADHD teen with cystic acne and chronic sinus congestion? It depends. I mean, ask your ENT to do a sinus culture and see if he's got yeast or bacteria growing in his sinus cavities that are driving that congestion. But I mean, from a food perspective, start with no grain, no pain. Teenagers can be tough because, they want to eat junk food because our culture has allowed, teenagers to make decisions that they're not mature enough to make, honestly. I mean, and our food systems and our schools have completely failed the teenagers. If your kids are going to, whether it's public or private school, I mean, the food sucks. I mean, honestly, in public school, that ketchup is considered a vegetable. And, how can you put corn syrup paste in an aluminum metal case and call that healthy? And how can you allow children to make their own decisions about nutrition? I mean, they don't make good decisions. They're kids. That's why they need parenting, and parenting shouldn't end at the schoolhouse, and schoolhouses should have better ability to understand that you don't offer kids apple pie or real food, because they're going to choose apple pie 90% of the time. You only offer them real food, but that's not what happens. So kids are preconditioned, unfortunately, nowadays to think that it's normal to eat all that garbage, and you have to really work with them. I mean, if they're the good thing there is he's got an ADHD issue, so he's motivated at least maybe to change something in order to feel better and do better. And so you have to work with their pain psychologically to motivate them to make better decisions about their diet. But I can tell you what I'd do if it's my kid. I'd probably pull them out of school so that there were no other food options. I'd probably hire a tutor and maybe do homeschooling, and I would only have real food in the house, and that would be the end of it. And then we would see what would happen. But I wouldn't put up with any nonsense about, but Dad, I want to eat this, and Dad, I want to eat that. No, you're not doing that because it's making you sick. And some people say, well, it's just cystic acne. And I would say, no, it's the skin erupting with massive cysts because the body's being poisoned. And that's a very serious condition. It's only going to manifest in other ways as you grow older and continue to make the same mistakes. And so for me and mine, I don't compromise in that way. I wouldn't compromise in that way if it were my child. But that's no judgment from me to you. I'm just trying to give you feedback for what I would do. So Jen, so follow up to Jen's question on heat intolerance above 80 degrees. That's where my mind was going. You said you had mold toxicity. And I thought if it's 80 degrees in your house, probably what's happening is that hotter temperature is driving mold spiration and increasing the mold and mycotoxin load within the home itself. But also sometimes what happens is mold poisoning, mycotoxin poisoning, causes a sympathetic dominance. So it completely shuts down your parasympathetic nervous system, drives you into fight or flight. If you're there long enough, you become intolerant to big changes and swings in temperature. You become intolerant to most sensations. Smells become troublesome. Multiple chemical sensitivity becomes a problem. You develop hypersensitivity to most foods. Remember what mold does. Mold toxins drive your body into mast cell activation, which means your body becomes hyperreactive to everything, including variable changes in the environment like heat. So get out of the mold would be the best advice that I could give you. I'm a new naturopath, recently have had shingles, herpes, virus, double pneumonia, and now flu again. What could cause my immune system to be so weak in the last 6 months? Are you in mold, Kimberly? If you're in mold, that could do it. Mold is an immunosuppressant, big time immunocompromiser. And so if you've had all these different outbreaks just in a short period of time, have you moved? Did you maybe move into a new apartment? Or maybe are you working in a clinic that has a potential for mold? I have a number of patients, but one of that comes to mind is a doctor in Canada, and she had mold in her house and she had mold in her clinic, and there were different microbiome molds. So like she would go to her clinic and then she could maybe see a patient for a short period of time, and then she'd have to go take a nap. She was so exhausted. And what we ultimately found was in her clinic, there was mold growing underneath the baseboards and she was being poisoned. But then when she would go home and go to bed, she had mold in a wall cavity in her bedroom. I think it was a wall cavity. And so she wouldn't sleep well. And so she'd never really recover. And she was getting hit in both places. And ultimately we found it in both places because we measured it. So if there's any suspicion at all in that regard, get some mycotoxin testing done. Look at your environment as a potential reason. Other things that it could be that we see with failing immune systems, and I don't know where you stand in terms of your diet, but if you're on a vegan-based diet at all, you're probably not getting enough protein for your immune system to function properly. So consider your protein quantity in your diet. You might consider getting measured for nutritional deficiencies. Nutrients are necessary for immune function. Go back and watch Tuesday's show. I did a whole section on how nutrients regulate all the different arms of your immune system. And so, for example, vitamin D deficiencies, zinc deficiencies, selenium deficiencies can make people more prone and predisposed to recurring infection. So you may have something like that going on, and you may have a little bit of all of those things going on. And that's sometimes where it can become complex and where testing can really be helpful. Let's see, I answered that one. Diagnosed with anti-GAD65, autoimmunity, and encephalitis. Neurologist wants me to take Rituxan and doesn't believe diet would help. Should I take Rituxan? I can't answer that question, whether you should or shouldn't. That's got to come from you and your comfort with it. What I can say is that Rituxan isn't going to solve your problem. You want to solve your problem, you've got to figure out what's driving the autoimmunity. Triggers are driving it. So start here. Diet, microbes, toxins. Get those measured. Your neurologist, if he didn't talk to you about those 3 triggers and he's telling you that this doesn't matter, fire him. Go get a new neurologist or get a different doctor altogether. But anytime a doctor tells you diet doesn't matter, honestly, tell them to piss off and move on down the road, because that doctor's dangerous. Doctors that don't understand and respect food as a means to better health, they're dangerous. In my opinion, malpractice. That'll never change. They're never going to appreciate nutrition. Even with all the great and wonderful things we're trying to do with MAHA, because until the schools are no longer under the boot of the pharmacy industry, nutrition is going to be reprimanded, undermined. They're going to publish fake studies about how vitamins are dangerous, and they're going to keep scaring people away from it as much as they can because they have a monopoly. Medicine is, for all intents and purposes, it is a monopoly. And in the US, monopolies are supposed to be illegal, but that hasn't stopped it from happening. It's a really interesting book, interesting read for those of you who like history. It's a book called Wilk, W-I-L-K, Wilk versus the AMA. And so Wilk was a chiropractor, and he actually got sick of the rhetoric. You hear this, I hear this a lot. People are like, oh, what does that chiropractor know? What do chiropractors are quacks? Whatever, screw off. We don't really care about your opinions. If you're willing to go over here and get poison and call that medicine, and that's the way you want to live your life, and that's your philosophy, more power to you. But Wilk was a chiropractor who got sick of the rhetoric. When you hear that chiropractors stroke people out, or when you hear chiropractic is dangerous, that whole messaging was actually proven in this Wilk versus the AMA, which was a court case. Wilk proved that the AMA had purposefully created false propaganda to scare people away from chiropractic and other forms of what we call alternative medicine. And he won the antitrust lawsuit. Very interesting story. Nothing really ever came of it. There was no punishment. Nobody ever went back at the AMA and dismantled them for the monopoly. But at the end of the day, it's good knowledge to have. You can kind of see how corrupt and how powerful that industry is. But it isn't even just chiropractic. It was naturopathic too. The AMA had programs to deter people away from naturopathy and other forms of manipulative therapy and massage therapy and acupuncture. And if it was considered an alternative medicine, the AMA had a plan to destroy them and create their own monopoly. And Wilk versus the AMA is a great book on the history of that. But I don't even know why we got on track of why we went in that direction. But anyway, it's a good deviation. Is there something extra I should take or think about or do as a celiac working out to gain weight and muscle mass? Yeah, get your protein up. It's probably too low. It should be 1/3 of all of your calories should be protein. If you're trying to put weight on, you need to, as you're a celiac, if you haven't read No Grain, No Pain, if you're still following the traditional gluten-free diet, stop it. Just stop with the oats and the corn and the rice. Stop with the processed junk that they're feeding all the celiacs. The average celiac will not get better. They'll get better some, but 92% of them have persistent inflammation. And these studies have been done numerous times. And I think the longest one was 5 years. Celiacs on a 5 years of what we call the traditional gluten-free diet, which is wheat, barley, and rye-free, but still had persistent and pervasive inflammation. And many of them go on to develop new forms of autoimmunity, other forms of autoimmunity within the same cluster of genetic risk. So we'll see celiacs are more prone to developing RA, and they're more prone to developing type 1 diabetes, and they're more prone to developing lupus, and they're more prone to developing Addison's disease and Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. But the problem with medical fragmentation is if you've got celiac and you go on to develop any of those other autoimmune diseases, those other experts that treat those other forms of autoimmunity don't know anything about gluten as it relates to those forms of autoimmunity. So they just treat you with drugs and tell you that your diet is fine, when in fact you might be eating corn or rice or oats, and it's driving that autoimmune process, not allowing you to ever really fully recover. If you want to put the weight back on, you've got to heal the gut and you've got to restore the absorption. And you're not going to do that with a bunch of gluten-free corn and rice and oat products. That's my experience. And I've been doing this almost 26 years now. I see a ton of celiacs who their diets have failed them. Their traditional gluten-free diets have failed them. So back to your question, what can you do? Get your diet right first. Go on what we call a true gluten-free diet, which is not just wheat, barley, rye, but it's also corn, rice, oat, sorghum, millet, teff, triticale, amaranth, buckwheat, and quinoa free. Okay, so get all that out of your diet. Think meat, vegetables, fruit for a time, and make sure you're eating enough total calories. And you can figure out what that needs to look like by there are all kinds of calculators, apps you can download either to your phone, or you can just type in a Google search. Just type in BMR calculator. BMR stands for basic metabolic rate. And so the basic metabolic rate is based on your age, your height, and your weight. And it's a calculation of how many calories you burn at rest. And so you can take your BMR, and from there, you can calculate how many calories you need to eat to sustain your current weight. And then you can add calories on top of that if your goal is weight gain. So that way you make sure you're eating enough total calories. I ordered the food sensitivity and cellular nutrient tests. Should I wait a couple of weeks on my new supplements till I do the testing? Yeah, I mean, that would be ideal, because if you have like a food sensitivity to an ingredient in a supplement, you'd want to get a different supplement, right? So just that would be, I think, smart. I just ordered your book. Finally, it'll be here tomorrow. Good job, Kimberly. Let us know. When you read it and apply it, please come back to the show and give us your experience. Can I flex my biceps? No, I'm not going to flex my biceps. Any thoughts on why visual snow appears and how to treat it? Usually visual snow is very frequently it's either a nervous system disruption. So like think POTS, orthostatic problems with blood pressure. Also think Blood sugar control. So is your blood glucose too high? Is your A1C too high? Is your insulin too high? Visual snow can be disturbed. Your eyes are the most susceptible to higher levels of blood sugar over time. Yeah, you're 32 times more likely to go blind when your blood sugar is too high. And so it can start with visual snow, and I would look to blood sugar as a major driver for that. Thoughts on adrenal or liver mass, elevated liver enzymes, started fasting, but what else helps? You got to figure out what's driving it. I mean, if you've got liver damage, well, one, make sure it's too complex. I don't want to give you medical advice, but I would say if you've got a liver mass and it's not cancer and your liver enzymes are elevated, then you've got to find out what's poisoning your liver. And there are a handful of things that consequentially will poison the liver. And one is food. We go back to this, right? Diet. I had a case once, woman, she was really skeptical at first, but she had autoimmune hepatitis and they didn't know what to do with her. And so, I mean, what ultimately happens with those patients is the autoimmune disease destroys their liver and they end up on a liver transplant list. And if you ever know anything about people that get organ transplants, now you're on immune suppressants for the rest of your life. And it's a miserable ordeal. It sounds great. I'm going to get a new organ, but the reality is the drugs you have to take for that organ not to get rejected or create a quality of life that's not great. So you got to figure out why the liver's being damaged. If you're not drinking alcohol, there are other toxins that can poison the liver, and sometimes it's food, and sometimes it's microbial, and sometimes it's environmental mold exposure. Sometimes it's other chemicals in your environment that you're being exposed to, and you need to do some advanced testing to try to determine what those things are. Fasting's not going to cure the problem. You might get bouts where if food is driving it, where your liver enzymes go down through the fast, but then once you start eating again, if you start eating the things that you shouldn't, the enzymes are just going to go back up. Have you ever treated visual snow? I don't treat. The difference between what I do and what other doctors do is very distinct. I don't treat disease. What it means to treat disease, it means to give something to suppress symptoms of a diagnosed condition based on clusters of symptoms. So what is a diagnosis? A diagnosis is the fancy way of a doctor giving a Latin name to a cluster of symptoms that a patient presents with, and then selectively choosing the mechanistic chemistry drug. And if you're talking about natural, we could say green medicine, we could say nutrient, or we could say herb, to treat the symptoms and still not understand why the cause or what the cause is. So when you ask me, have I treated it? I don't treat disease. What I do is I figure out what a person's triggers are, and we remove the triggers. And when the problem goes away, we all celebrate. But I don't take lightly the fact that you are going to treat your own disease, right? Like when people say, "What are you going to do for me, doctor? How are you going to save my life or help me?" I'm not going to save your life. You're going to save your own life. You're just going to get a roadmap. You're going to get a blueprint, because what I identify is what a person needs to do, what a person should do in terms of diet, lifestyle, and environment, so that their body heals itself. And if you want to call that treatment, you can call that treatment. But I don't look at it as treatment. I look at it as matching your body's genotype to your environment so that your phenotypic expression is one of good health as opposed to one of poor health. I hope that helps you. But to me, the clarity matters, because there's a lot of doctors out there that call themselves functional, and they're full of shit, honestly. They're green medicine doctors who are just as allopathic as the neurologist that wants to give you gabapentin. They're just wanting to give you high doses of quercetin or curcumin or turmeric for your inflammation. So they're using a form of green medicine to alter your symptoms, but they're still not asking the right damn questions, which is, what is driving your illness? What are the behaviors that you're choosing in your life that you didn't even know were bad behaviors, right? Because you all have a preconceived belief that what you're doing is fine. You know how many thousands of times I've heard, "My diet's great, Dr. Osborne, it's not my diet," and then it's their diet. Or how many times people say, well, I exercise plenty. And it's not that. And then when I start asking questions and digging deeper, they're not exercising. What they're calling exercise, their perception of what they believe is false to their own detriment. And it's not their fault. It's just that they were taught wrong. And so part of what we do is we make sure that you're not limited by your own ignorance, and that we free you of that ignorance by educating you so that you're freed up to make the right decisions, to allow your body to heal and repair itself. Because ultimately, your body knows how to heal better than I could heal it, better than any other doctor could ever heal it. Your body is imbued with the power and the strength and the intelligence innately of God. And no doctor can compare with that, but you have to quit poisoning yourself, even if it's poisoning yourself in ways you don't know are happening. And I don't say that as an insult to any of you who are sick. I say that as a way to help you have hope and empowerment that, look, the reality is in some way you're being poisoned. You just don't know what those ways are until you measure it. And this book is just the blueprint trial run for many of you to get started, right? And what many people come back and say is, I read the book, I applied it, I'm 60 or 70% better, but there's still something missing. And that's where testing comes into play. And some people that read the book say, my problems are gone. You've solved my problems with the knowledge you shared with me. And thank you. And we love that. That's my favorite story to hear. The patients that I don't have to see in my clinic are my favorite ones. Why? Because that means that the work that I put out in the world that they accessed either for free or at very low barrier of cost changed and saved their life. And I don't have the burden of somebody who's ultra sick coming to see me, where now we have to dive deep and figure it out. And I don't have time to see everybody anyway. So to me, that's one of the reasons why we put so much information out every week, is we know there's a lot more sick people than there are me and other doctors like me. So we just hope that people who are truly searching for real answers and not for, butter cake, or lip service answers, find us and find the information when they're ready. They'll find it when they're ready to find it. And I truly believe that. Regarding filtration, I recommend a secondary filter at the water heater. Okay. I've seen a lot of bacteria when draining water heaters. The right one makes a difference. That's a good observation. I had never thought of it that way. Have you heard about water memory? Yes. The fourth phase of water and water memory. Read the work of Gerald Pollack. And water memory is predominantly what homeopathy is based on. If you've ever seen or read much about homeopathic medicine, which is a very valid form of medicine, is based on the law of infinitesimals and largely in part of water memory. I've heard about structured water. Mold MCAS equals seizures. It's not that mold MCAS equals seizures, is that mold also causes nerve damage that can cause seizures, but MCAS specifically is not the driving force behind the seizure. Mineral deficiencies can contribute to neurological abnormalities that can drive seizure and seizure disorder as well. If you don't get a let's see here. I've been diagnosed with MCAS. Do you think, since I lived in a moldy apartment for 5 years, that the mold caused my MCAS? It very likely did. It's a very, very common trigger. But let's talk about another potential, because something has happened this past year that I don't necessarily agree with, but a lot of people in my space are just ecstatic about it. And that's, there were years where hormone replacement therapy for women was kind of demonized as a driver of cancer and a driver of increased risk for stroke and heart attack. And I'm talking about estrogen specifically. And so that position being kind of reversed at this point, and the doctors all changing their mind, I don't agree that doctors should have all changed their mind succinctly in that way. What I agree with is that the right woman under the right circumstances is a good candidate for estrogen therapy, but the wrong woman under the wrong circumstances taking estrogen where her levels are too high, you can drive mast cell problems. Estrogen, remember estrogen, this is one of the reasons why women, 80% of autoimmune diagnoses and MCAS and POTS are women. It's because of estrogen. And this is a sex difference. And you can't change that. Women are different than men. But if you're taking estrogen, ladies, because you've been told your estrogen is low and your doctor's not monitoring your levels. And I just had this woman this week who could come back, her estrogen levels are like 200 above the limit. And her doctor doesn't even want to change her dose. I'm like, but her symptoms are mast cell-like. And so I'm like, are you having these symptoms? She's like, yeah, I started having these kinds of symptoms. So she's basically, her estrogen that's been prescribed to her is driving mast cell activation. And that's what estrogen does. It phenotypically changes the expression of your immune cells to favor the release of histamine. And if you understand that, that's another cause or another potentiator of mast cell beyond mold. Zearalenone, which is the fusarium mycotoxin in mold, can drive mast cell activation. Plastics, any chemical, pesticide, herbicide, endocrine disrupting compound that mimics estrogen is something that can drive mast cell. So when you've been diagnosed with mast cell, maybe you were in mold and maybe mold was the initial like big burst of drive for it, and you're out of mold now, but you're still struggling with some of the symptoms, you've got to really start looking at your environmental estrogen exposures. You've got to look at, are you taking estrogen prescriptions that might also be continuing to drive that problem forward? Let's see. Let's go down on the right. What are your thoughts on using hair strands for mineral testing? Not a fan, Claudia. It's nowhere near the accuracy as an INA test. If you're trying to really understand the mineral adequacy of your cells, you need to do INA. Hair testing, it can be influenced by many things, but hair is affected by the soap and the shampoo and the other things you put in it. But it's also an excretory material, so your body might be detoxing certain metals out of your body through your hair, and that can skew, what you find on a hair analysis test. It's not that that hair analysis can't have some value, but I think too many doctors that I've seen try to use hair analysis as a solo tool for making all their decisions, and you're not going to find the right answer in a hair analysis. For arthritis, what do you suggest for supplemental support? What kind of arthritis, Brian? Is it like general osteoarthritis and you're just trying to like take away some of the aches and pains? I would recommend a few different things. One, I'd recommend Ultra Joint. If you got a gluten-free site, you just type in Ultra Joint. I'd recommend Ultra SPM, which is a lipid derivative that can help with the ceasing of inflammation. I'd recommend vitamin C and quercetin. If you're talking about autoimmune arthritis, I'd recommend finding out what your triggers are. But some people just have like a creaky or achy joint from wear and tear or past injury, and so they've got arthritis has set into that joint. The supplements I just said are the things I'd recommend for that. Is gluten connected to dyshydrotic eczema? Yes. And are there other potential triggers? Also, yes. Like gluten can. What would cause a 250 milligram dose of nicotinic acid to flush extensively on one day and the next day hardly anything with the same dose? Probably what you ate. Maybe you ate something with it that slowed down the digestion or created like a sustained release of it. If you take it on an empty stomach, the likelihood it's going to cause a more severe flush it's higher. If you take it with food, depending on how well your stomach and GI tract works to digest, it might kind of slow down the release of that nicotinic acid into your systems, thereby leading to less of a kind of a exaggerated flushing response. The chiropractor noted a structural problem when I was 28. Medical types I worked with wouldn't even look at the x-rays. More of a comment. Let's go down. What causes a body to be so sensitive to every chemical, additive, preservative, oxalate, no chemicals, bad food in my body? I can't. Need root cause and where to start. The biggest driver of what I have seen as far as this specific question, the biggest driver of multiple chemical sensitivity is mold. People that lose their capacity to tolerate everything usually are in mold. So I would encourage you to get tested for mycotoxins and mold. I would encourage you to potentially, once you can confirm that, if that's true, then get a very extensive mold exam on your home, meaning mold inspection, and go to Mold Jacked. we have an entire article on how not to do a mold inspection, because here's what happens. Depending on the state you're in, the country you're in, there's different criteria for certifying a mold inspector. In Texas, for example, you take a weekend class and you can get certified by the state to do mold inspections. And that's sad. It really is sad, because most of these types don't know jack shit about mold, and they're dangerous because they go to people's houses, they do an air test inside, they do an air test on your driveway, and then they tell you you don't have a problem. And honestly, these people aren't qualified to tell you anything. In my opinion, all the best mold inspectors I know have lost loved ones to mold, have been in mold and been very, very sick. And what makes them so fantastic is that they've gone above and beyond. They're not the mediocre masses. It's just like we were talking about earlier about doctors. When you graduate mediocre technicians that don't give a shit about people and don't have empathy, and they're in it for the wrong reasons, and they just want to make a lot of money and be called doctor and have respect, what you get is crappy outcomes, which is where we're at. And it's no different in the mold inspection industry. When you allow people to get a certification for a weekend class, but they don't know or have any background or understanding medically about how dangerous mold and mycotoxins can be, and they dismiss it and gaslight people and say how, oh, mold is everywhere, and they give you kind of the same line of horse garbage that so many people believe about mold. It's wrong. Ultimately, end up hurting people. And I've had many patients who've had mold inspectors that were not worth a dime of what they were paid do that and keep my patients sick and keep my patients unhealthy. So it's very, very important, if you're thinking about mold and you're considering mold inspection, that you understand what entails a good mold inspection versus what entails a crappy one. And so I have an article on that. Maybe we can put that up, because there's been a lot of mold questions today. But we can put that article up. Please, 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 whatever you do, if you suspect mold, read the article. And if the mold inspector you're on the phone with is about to hire doesn't fit the criteria that we lay out in this article, then absolutely do not hire them, because literally they could kill you, or they could allow you to put your life in jeopardy when they don't find the mold that's actually there. Is your Detox C powder the one you recommend for arthritis? Yes, Detox C. What could be possible cause of elevated vitamin D levels if supplemental D is not? So you're not, the question got cut off. So it looks like you're not taking vitamin D, but your vitamin D levels are elevated. So if you've got vitamin D levels that are high, I might look at your kidney and your liver function. I also might look at if you're doing anything else in terms of your diet, where you're eating maybe a lot of liver. Liver can be very rich in vitamin D. So if there's something else that you're taking that could have very large levels of vitamin D, a lot of times people that are super healthy, Richard, and don't have a lot of inflammation and get a lot of sunshine, we can see vitamin D levels go up in those individuals. Now, I would also ask you to define for you what elevated means, because I had a doctor a few weeks ago tell one of my patients, because their level of vitamin D was 90, that they were at a toxic level, and that's just nonsense. So anyway, there's more to that, but hopefully that gives you a starting place. I had very high liver enzymes and was told autoimmune hepatitis. I remediated my home from mold, and liver enzymes normalized, and autoimmune tests went from positive to negative. Love it. Thanks for sharing, Len. I'm glad that you found the answer. All righty. Go up on the left. A little more. Would I recommend Rife machines? Possibly. I mean, those can be helpful. I mean, depending if you're trying to treat what I think you're trying to treat. Rife was a brilliant scientist, and Rife machines can be a valuable asset in that regard. A little bit more. A little bit more. A little bit more. Okay, I think I got all those, making sure I went through them all. Anything on the right? Okay. I think we did it, folks. 2 hours and we got all your questions in. Look, I hope you learned something today. I hope you walked away with some value that you could apply in your own life and find better health. If you're looking for more information and you're new to the show, make sure you hit subscribe down below, hit that little bell button, and you'll get reminded. We do live Q&As every Thursday, same time. And I do a live long crash course every Tuesday at 6 p.m. and that's Central Standard Time. So we're here every week for you guys to support you. If you're looking for high quality multivitamin, this is our sale this week. We have both Ultra and Multinutrients are on sale. If you use the coupon code MULTI, M-U-L-T-I, 15, MULTI15, you'll save 15% off of our premium, high quality, gluten, grain-free, contaminant-free multivitamins. It's one of the best things you can do if you're just healthy and trying to stay healthy and need some food insurance. Appreciate you all tuning in. We'll see you on Tuesday for another show, and I hope your weekend is fantastic.